My name is Elizabeth Bobeth, and this is my final project. The artist I have chosen is Vincent van Gogh, and specifically his work, Starry Night. Vincent van Gogh was born in 1853 in the southern Netherlands. He was the eldest of 6 siblings, but was closest to immediately younger brother, Theodorus, or Theo, who later supported Vincent financially and emotionally. As a child, he was encouraged to draw and paint and had a semi-successful art teacher who focused on Impressionism at the middle school he went to, but he did not find enjoyment in his studies there away from home. In 1869, he started working as an art dealer, and after a series of events that worsened his emotional state and caused him to go into isolation, he was fired. From there, he worked a variety of jobs, including minister and box shopkeeper. With Theo's encouragement, Vincent went to study with William Rollesque, who convinced Vincent to enroll in an art school. Vincent dropped out of the school, proposed his love for a widowed cousin, who instantly said no, and studied with Anton Wauve, his second cousin, until a falling out. From there, he studied art in several academias, and between hospital visits for his alcoholism and his art in this time period started off with dark, earthy tones in his work before Theo suggested that Vincent should add more bright color tones like the Impressionism movement. Vincent did, and with Theo's help, improved his style, taking elements from Pointillism. In 1888, he moved to Arles, where his infamous Yellow House was. He cut off his ear during a fit of hallucinations, and as his paranoia was still rising, voluntarily went to St. Paul's Asylum. At St. Paul's Asylum, Vincent had stability. His works from the asylum were shown at art shows, and Claudette Monet praised them, saying his was the best of the show. Vincent moved out of the asylum to get treatment under Dr. Paul Gatchett. In 1890, sadly, he shot himself in the chest with a revolver. He suffered for 30 hours before dying from the infection. His brother Theo, who had rushed to Vincent's deathbed, died 6 months ahead of him. Vincent van Gogh was 37 when he died. Only towards the ending years of Vincent's life was his works being received well, with them being hosted in art shows more frequently, although even to this day, one must have a certain appeal to his works. And Vincent also suffered from many physical and mental ailments, including what many think is epilepsy and bipolar depression. This I'll touch on later. Vincent van Gogh is classified as a post-impressionist and can be argued as one of the starting post-impressionists. Post-impression was seen as a revolution to the impressionists' concern about using realistic lighting and colors. Post-impressionism has these distinct characteristics: bright colors, thick applications of paint, real-life subject matters, distorted form for emphasis, and unusual colors for subject matters. And while Vincent van Gogh was part of this movement and helped influence it with his ways of painting how he feels, there were different ways that the other post-impressionists expressed themselves. An example of another post-impressionist is Georges Pierre Seurat, who had specialized in Pointillism, which is characterized by small dots. I chose one of his lesser works, Grey Weather, which is on the PowerPoint right now, because it is clear to see the Pointillism in this work over his study for a Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jarte. Bright colors can be seen, especially on the tree to the left. The distorted form is the Pointillism, which can appear realistic from far away, but the dotted nature can be seen up close, while the details of the thick paint cannot be seen from our distance. This is an ordinary scene, and matches all the characteristics for post-impressionism. Looking away from Grey Weather, Starry Night looks drastically different. There is so much more color, noticeably the blues, and realism seems not to be a major concern, especially with the moon. But many of the concepts of post-impressionism and impressionism are here. Some key concepts of impressionism are noticeable, including noticeable brush strokes and the element of movement. This work, painted from a memory he had in the asylum, from looking out of his window onto the wheat fields, has the bright and unusual blues and yellows, the thick applications of paint, as noticed on the close-up to the right, and the distorted form of the sky. Vincent painted using his emotions to help inspire him, and when I look at this painting, I experience peace. This is an oil on canvas painting. Oil paints offer a tremendous range of color and are very versatile. Unfortunately, they can be a bit spendy for good pigmentation, color, and intensity, which leads me to my recommendation. So I chose to do my inspired piece on MLK Fountain at USF. I would be using acrylic paint instead of oils, thick canvas-like paper on cardboard instead of a canvas, and would be using the angle I had already viewed the fountains by while relaxing with my friends. The fountain is nature, and while to non-USF students it has the possibility of being special, it's kind of an ordinary view for us, especially in Florida where we have many fountains. I had a timeline planned where I would sketch the area for an hour, paint a mini picture in an hour, begin painting there and finish the majority of them in 2 hours, and then do touch-ups at home. That is not what happened. I arrived on campus and found my location. My friend who had joined me for lunch admired the view after ducking her head a bit and commented on how pretty it was. 20 minutes later, and she was surprised at how far I got on my sketch. I had difficulty in getting the angle I wanted correct. The angle determines how the painting flows, and I wanted it to have an open composition, but that meant the fountain ledge had to be at the right angle. I also wanted the first focal area to be the fountains on the left, leading the viewer to look to the right and observing the sky. This also required the perfect angle. After another hour or so, the sketch was complete enough to try and work on the miniature painting. My friend had gone to class at this point, so we had been on campus for about 2 hours. The miniature painting was mainly a color scheme, as doing the squirrels like Vincent van Gogh would be time-consuming in my mind. And here I have a little comparison on the two sketches I did. I did a little of the style I thought would be the best for the fountain while keeping the Vincent van Gogh style, and the water was moving violent, so I chose the short strokes that did not swirl. And so I began to sketch my actual paper, and then I started adding painting. I used a mixture of white and blue to indicate where the fountains would be after my sketch, so I could put down a base color coat and begin actually painting. It was now way over the time I expected, and not much progress had been made. The form of the fountains were starting to show, and the trees in the background started to contrast them. It was nearing hour 5, which means I had to go to class. The painting would have to wait another day to be finished. This is what I left with, on the left. On the right was the beginning of stylization, which is mainly apparent in the blue section to the right that was done at a later day. It was time to start adding more layers and adding short strokes that add texture. I had studied Vincent van Gogh before, and I had actually done a rendition of Starry Night on my graduation cap for high school, so I knew how to do his style for the most part. The technique is much like impasto, but instead of a palette knife, it is done by a paintbrush. And here's my work after 2 hours. As you can see, the stylization is coming along nicely, and the contrast between the sky, the grass, and the water is apparent, even though all of them are cold colors. There's one more progression photo showing the details up close. And here's another selfie. And this is the final piece. I realized that Vincent van Gogh must have had to have intense emotion to paint in this style because it was very time-taking and was not especially popular with some parties, but he drew immense enjoyment out of it. The final aspect of this project is the social aspect, and I chose to focus on mental health. Like I said in the beginning, Vincent van Gogh was hospitalized and put in an asylum. He knew he had mental issues, the most likely bipolar disorder, and in seeking to relieve himself from the downs he would have, he would use methods like alcohol, tobacco, and fasting. He wrote many letters to Theo and others, and I have 2 quotes from his letters here. The first quote is, "I am so angry with myself because I cannot do what I should like to do, and at such a moment one feels as if one was lying bound hand and foot at the bottom of a deep dark well, utterly helpless." A letter to Theo from Vincent during a bout of depression. And then Vincent knew he had issues. He didn't know how to help himself, though. As he began having hallucinations, he became more manic. "I feel happier here with my work than I could be outside. By staying here a good long time, I should have learned regular habits, and in the long run, the result will be more order in my life." This is Vincent talking about the asylum to a friend. He was happy at the asylum. He did not like to be restrained to the grounds during certain periods, like during night, but he did acknowledge they were helping him. Starry Night was a view out of his window that he later painted by memory from this. Mental illnesses need treatment. There is a group of people who, when talking about medication or going for help, they think it will strip the people who have these disorders of their creativity. It leads people who have mental illnesses, like bipolar depression or attention deficit, that they will lose their creativity if they're medicated. I was diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety in 4th grade and was medicated for my ADHD until 6th grade. I never learned coping mechanisms for my anxiety and would often have panic attacks. At this point, I turned to art and would use it as an outlet, like Van Gogh, but also like him, I didn't know how to cope properly. As I entered into college, I started to decline like Van Gogh, although I had different vices than him. After passing out from hyperventilation one day due to a panic attack, I knew I needed healthy coping methods. Slowly over the next semester and summer, I learned how to take care of myself mentally and to be in control of my disorder, just like Vincent van Gogh did when he painted Starry Night. People are more than their disorders, and I hope my piece proves that to you as much as Vincent van Gogh's did. In conclusion, Vincent van Gogh was a post-impressionist artist who exhibited traits that suggested bipolar disorder and epilepsy. The post-impressionism movement is characterized by bright color, thick applications of paint, real-life subject matter, distorted forms for emphasis, and unusual colors for subject matters. People are more than their disorder, and their creativity will not be destroyed if they seek treatment. And in many cases, their creativity will be elevated because they won't have to worry about surviving anymore. And that was my final presentation. Here are my references, and I hope you guys all enjoyed.